Well, let's get more perspective now on the rental situation here in the U.S. I'm joined live by Henry Lewis Taylor from Buffalo, New York, via Skype. He's a professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Buffalo School of Architecture and Planning. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start by talking about the domino effect of residential renters not being able to pay their rent. How does that impact not just landlords, but their mortgages and the broader economy during a pandemic like this?
I think it will have a devastating impact, especially on those small property owners. To fully grasp the significance of non-payment of rent, it's important to understand what rent is used for. Property owners, regardless of the size of the unit, whether it's large or small, have a certain set of expenses that must be covered through their rental income. We're talking about repairs and upkeep on the apartments or buildings, improvements and property upgrades, operations, which refers to the staffing that you have to deal with all kinds of issues on the property, insurance, fees and taxes, and then the mortgages. And in addition to that, a certain percentage of the rent is used to generate income. So when the rents are cut off, and when a significant section of the rental income is denied these property owners, then they're going to have a very serious issue in terms of maintaining the units. And I think this is particularly the case for the smaller property owners, because they're not going to have the cash reserves or the access to the credit lines to sustain them over an extended period of time.
Now, I do want to look at some of the figures here, because just 69% of America's renters paid their rent by April 5th compared to 81% a month earlier. And at that time, 10 million people had also filed for bankruptcy. It's now 16 million and increasing, about 30% for mortgage borrowers. What does that mean as the months go on and on with this battle against COVID-19?
Well, what that means is that the federal government is really at some point going to have to step in with a much more expanded program of providing both a combination of protection for the renters, but also protection for the property owners. Without this, the housing crisis will continue to accelerate. Some of the earlier projections had this crisis ending in April or May or June. But when we listen to what many of the public health specialists say, we're talking about something that could extend well into the fall of 2020 and possibly beyond.
And you raise
for that length of time without substantial federal investments, we're going to have an unprecedented economic crisis.
Now, you raise an interesting point, because as we saw, New York and California are calling for this 90-day moratorium on tenants paying rent to landlords. But in terms of the reality, in terms of enforcing this for people who are actually on the ground dealing one-on-one with tenants and with mortgage owners, what does this actually mean in reality?
In reality, it means that 90 days is not enough. And another problem that occurs with the 90-day moratorium, this is just a moratorium on evictions. It's not a moratorium on rents. Rents are still due. And so landlords will have it well within their rights under the current provisions to ask for a repayment of those rents. So if you're paying just as little as $1,200 a month, in 90 days, you're talking about, or 120 days based on the CARES Act, you're talking about anywhere close to $4,000 to $5,000 that you will owe in back rent. For somebody who hasn't been working for an extended period of time, they're just not going to be able to cover that. On the flip side of that, many of these small property owners are not going to be able to get mortgage forbearance, or that is the abilities to not pay their mortgage for a period of time, or to have their mortgage restructured so it's easier to meet the notes. And so you've got the rock and the hardwood. And in that kind of situation, I think, again, without massive government intervention aimed at those two targets, the small property owners as well as the renters, you're going to be faced with a very, very serious economic issue in this country.
So then just very quickly, we have about 30 seconds now. We saw that analysts say that renters could need about $96 billion in payment assistance over the next 6 months. Will government intervention be enough? And if so, if not, what are the alternatives?
I don't think there's any alternatives to government intervention. What you'll want to do to complement government intervention is to mandate that mortgage brokers create a situation in which they do forbearance, where they simply suspend mortgage payments for an extended period of time. Many of these large banking companies and corporations, they have business continuity plans in place. And by that I mean to say they already have plans in place to deal with disasters, and they have significant financial reserves in order to do it. So if the government works with these banks, they can create the policies that would allow small business owners to be sustainable over a lengthy period of time. Not all property owners will need this. The larger corporations and companies, especially some of these hedge funds, again, they have business continuity plans, and they have the kind of financial reserves and credit accesses that will allow them to sustain themselves over an extended period of time. So the relief and the intervention has to be highly targeted and focus on specific groups that are most likely to be hurt or go under during this crisis period.
Well, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Henry Lewis Taylor there, professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Buffalo School of Architecture and Planning.